Of all the predators that have ever lived on our planet, humans are the most dominant. We are a species so powerful and influential that we transform, create, and destroy entire ecosystems. But humans were not always the top predators we are today. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, our ancestors occupied a precarious position as both predators and prey. They were active hunters in their ecosystems, sometimes felling large game. But they also lived in fear of dangerous carnivores that saw them as their next meal. Let's travel back to the Pleistocene epoch, a time that lasted from roughly 2.6 million to 11,700 years ago. For much of the Pleistocene, vast sheets of ice covered significant portions of North America, Europe, and Asia. Some of these ice sheets were multiple kilometers thick and were so heavy that they depressed the Earth's crust as ice sheets expanded. So did cold weather ecosystems like tundras and steppes. These cold and arid environments supported tolerant plants like grasses and shrubs, as well as iconic megafauna like saber-toothed cats and woolly mammoths. Earth was not buried in ice and snow for the entirety of the Pleistocene. Our planet cycled between cold glacial periods and warmer interglacial periods. Earlier in the Pleistocene, these cycles lasted around 41,000 years. Later on, they changed to roughly 100,000 years. Global temperatures rose by several degrees during interglacial periods, causing ice sheets to melt and sea levels to rise. As the climate became more temperate, glaciers retreated, so animals that thrived in steppes and tundras migrated toward the poles. Forests and grasslands expanded into previously cold, barren regions, leading to greater diversity and new populations of plants and animals. Around 300,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans, known as Homo sapiens, emerged in Africa. At the time, Neanderthals were also thriving in Eurasia. Together, these hominins had a lot in common with modern humans. They walked upright, wielded tools, and had brains of similar size relative to their bodies. However, they lived simpler and more dangerous lives, constantly exposed to the elements and vulnerable to hungry carnivores. Today, humans occupy spaces mostly removed from dangerous wildlife. We rarely encounter other apex predators like bears or big cats, except in zoos where we are protected by tall fences and reinforced glass. But let's jump back in time 200,000 years, just 100,000 years after the emergence of Homo sapiens. In this time, our ancestors lived alongside these deadly predators, competing with them for food, resources, and territory. Early humans were hunter-gatherers, meaning they foraged for plants and hunted wildlife to survive. That often meant competing for prey species with other predators, some of which saw our ancestors as food. Among the most dominant predators of the time were big cats, specifically large, powerful felids with blade-like teeth. The best known is Smilodon, a stocky, saber-toothed cat that lived in North and South America. Archaic humans, like Neanderthals, may not have seen Smilodon 200,000 years ago because they lived in different continents, but they did encounter another deadly feline. Homo therium, sometimes known as the scimitar-toothed cat, was a fast pack-hunting predator about the size of an African lion. Unlike Smilodon's long stabbing teeth, Homo therium had slightly shorter, flatter canines, better adapted to slicing and cutting through flesh. It also had longer limbs, suggesting it was a pursuit predator capable of running down its prey over moderate distances. Homo therium would have competed with archaic humans for many of the same prey animals. Both species hunted large herbivores of the day, like prehistoric antelopes and elephants, so the two hunters almost certainly crossed paths. Unlike many big cats today, recent genetic evidence suggests that Homo therium was most likely a diurnal or daytime hunter. With sharp vision and the endurance to exhaust most prey, a pack of Homo therium would have been a terrifying sight for early humans. Imagine waking up in the early dawn, just as light begins to grace the world, to face a stealthy pack of Homo therium, their golden eyes shimmering in the burgeoning light. Would you run? Hide? Fight? With survival hanging by a thread, the instincts of our ancient cousins would have decided their fates. Homo therium was not the only big cat on the prowl 200,000 years ago. The savannas and woodlands of Africa were home to several felids, including the relatives of modern panthers. For example, leopards lived in Africa during the Pleistocene and would have excelled at killing primates, maybe including early humans. These stealthy predators hunted on the ground and in the trees, leaving their prey with few places to hide. Leopards were especially deadly in African savannas, where they used their natural camouflage to hide amongst golden grasses and shrubs. These ferocious cats may have killed some of our ancestors, but there is limited fossil evidence of direct hunting behavior. Leopards, or a pack of Homotherium, may have attacked humans if injured or alone, but in general we might have seemed like risky targets to these big cats. Our ancestors and ancient cousins usually traveled in groups, making it harder for predators to pick off vulnerable targets. They also wielded rudimentary tools and weapons to fend off straightforward assaults, though these simple weapons provided less protection against surprise attacks from above. 200,000 years ago, our ancestors lived in fear of an avian species known today as the most powerful bird in Africa, the African crowned eagle. With a wingspan of up to 180 centimeters or 5.9 feet, this bird of prey ranks among the largest eagles in the world and is well known for hunting bigger prey animals. During the Pleistocene, the African crowned eagle swooped down on antelopes, monitor lizards, and occasionally even small hominids, making it one of the only known avian species to target our kind. While some predators soared over their heads, other carnivores lurked along the banks of rivers and lakes, where our ancestors gathered to drink, bathe, and find shelter. The most terrifying of these predators may have been the ancient ancestor of the modern Nile crocodile, a giant beast measuring up to 6 meters long and weighing up to 1,000 kilograms. This ambush predator likely waited in the shallows for an unsuspecting animal or human to approach the water's edge. If they bent down for a drink or waded into the shallows, the Nile crocodile launched at them with explosive speed and power, snatching them in its powerful jaws. Apex predators like crocodiles, eagles, and big cats were so terrifying that their presence in many ways shaped the behavior of early humans. For example, our ancestors rarely ventured out alone, partially in fear of predation. Instead, they found safety in numbers, forming multi-generational clans composed of extended family members. These groups were essential for the survival of Homo sapiens and also Neanderthals. Not only could they scare off predators, but they could also pool their resources and raise more children, improving their chances of survival in a very dangerous world. Within these communities, early humans crafted tools and weapons. The earliest hominin tools were made from stone and were likely used for processing small prey. But these simple tools didn't provide much protection against large creatures like cats and crocodiles. Between 300,000 and 200,000 years ago, our ancestors began experimenting with new types of weapons. The oldest conclusive evidence of stone-tipped projectile weapons, such as more advanced throwing spears, dates back around 280,000 years. These new forms of weaponry allowed our ancestors to hunt at a safer distance, or take down creatures many times their size. As their arsenal expanded, early humans became some of the deadliest hunters in Africa. Our ancestors also wielded one of the most effective deterrents against predators: fire. Paleoanthropologists estimate that hominins harnessed fire as early as 1 to 2 million years ago, but it took a long time for our ancestors to discover just how versatile and transformative fire can be by the time Homo sapiens emerged in Africa. Fire was more than a source of light and warmth. Our ancestors used it to cook their food and deter predators who might be lurking in the darkness. They even used simple heat-treating techniques to manipulate stone and wood, which enhanced the effectiveness of their tools and weapons. For a very long time, hominins relied on natural formations like caves and large trees to protect themselves from the many dangers of the wild. These formations were difficult to find, especially in open areas like savannas, leaving bands of hominins more vulnerable to predation. To solve this problem, early members of our genus Homo carved simple shelters out of natural materials. For example, in France, at a site known as Terra Amida, Archaeologists found traces of basic huts constructed using wood, stones, and animal skins roughly 400,000 years ago, although the dating is still a subject of debate. Over time, these sorts of shelters evolved into dome-shaped or teepee-like huts, in which our ancestors sought protection from the elements and any predators on the prowl. The greatest advantage of Homo sapiens and Neanderthals over other predators was their expanding intelligence, which allowed them to outmaneuver even the deadliest carnivores. Early humans would memorize and take advantage of the habits and behaviors of potential predators. They learned to predict where animals would travel during different seasons or at various times of day. This knowledge also gave our ancestors a significant advantage when hunting, allowing them to set up traps and ambushes for prey. For example, Homo sapiens may have driven larger animals into ravines, where groups of hunters lay in wait with deadly weapons and projectiles. With better strategies, shelters, and weapons, our ancestors continued to become more effective predators. Animals like cats and crocodiles were strong and deadly, but clans of humans would ultimately take over the continent as time passed. Many predators were driven out of their natural habitats and territories, and others struggled to find food in ecosystems dominated by humankind. Before long, Homo sapiens were changing the dynamics of African ecosystems. They were masters of their environments, establishing themselves as the most dominant species in Africa and eventually the entire world.